Jesse, you there?
Yep. Can you hear me?
Okay, heard you. I the first one?
Yes.
Ah, okay. Well, I move we adjourn. I'll second it and I'll vote on it. You can go home for dinner.
Sounds good.
How are you, sir?
Good. How are you?
Thank you. I'm sorry Chris is leaving.
Yeah.
Town has to go through that whole process.
Yep.
Southwest Harbor's having a good time with personnel.
We sure are.
I think Millinocket's having a better time though.
Yes. Yes. Yep. Millinocket has us beat at the moment.
Wow.
Yep.
And Belfast is beating up the people in the corner, whoever it might be.
Yep. Interesting times.
They sure are. I got my first shot.
Did you?
Yes, I did.
Good.
Yeah, so I'm on the road to something, but I'm not sure if anyone's going to be there when I get there.
Which one did you get?
Mondaro one.
Yeah.
Yeah. And they handled. I had it done up at the. I'm over 70, so I fall in that first group.
Yep.
And they handled up at the Ellsworth Main Coast Memorial, and they did a very efficient job. I mean,
Good.
you were in and out in like 23 minutes.
Yep.
In fact, you'd be out in less than that, but they make you sit there for 15 minutes, make sure you don't have an immediate reaction to a vaccine.
Right. Yep.
But
Yep.
they're organized. It moves smooth as silk.
Yep. Good.
So if everyone else can get doing that, maybe we can get our state done in an efficient way.
Yeah. I know. I think from what I hear, because I attend the COVID-19 Down East Task Force meetings each week with the hospital. And I think, luckily, I think a lot of what we see on the national news about the problems with it aren't affecting us here. We seem to have a good plan for rolling it out compared to the.
It seems to be working.
Seems to be working here.
I did find, I would say my major complaint is the hospital, Northern Light. The way they've set up their website is awful.
Mm-hmm.
In that it crashes at 2 o'clock immediately.
Mm.
It crashed on me 2 weeks in a row.
Yep.
But I discovered if you stay with it long enough, all of a sudden they say all appointments are filled. Stay with it for another half hour, and the screen comes up and say, "What appointment do you want?" And that's happened to me twice. And I would have had an earlier shot, except I didn't have my Social Security Medicare number. And by the time I got downstairs to get it, my slot got filled.
Yep.
But it took me an hour and 10 minutes to sign on that way. I just got it to 20 to 3, and it worked.
Yep.
And the MDI hospital has a sign-up list, and I've already got a call back from them to say I'm on a list, and I'll hear it in a day or two. Of course, I'll take it. So get it over there. But they have.
You talk about the vaccine.
Working better.
You talk about the vaccine.
Yeah. I got mine on Friday and went extremely smoothly up at Ellsworth.
Where?
Yeah.
The hospital?
In and out in 25 minutes.
But at the hospital?
Yeah.
Is that a train?
Ship's clock.
Oh, very nice. Classy.
It is 6 o'clock. Okay. Let's wait a minute. See if anybody else is going to join us.
Do we know if anyone's not joining us?
Marjorie was going to try. She had a doctor's appointment at 3 in Bangor.
Oh.
So she may not make it for 6, and she may not make it at all.
How about Brett?
Brett did pick up his packet, but I haven't heard specifically.
Okay.
He usually tells me if he's going to be late.
We'll give him a second. Just saw, my wife showed me this hilarious video of a Zoom court proceeding down in Texas, at a district court in Texas, where one of the lawyers had a filter on, and he was a cat, but he didn't know how to turn it off. So James, I'm glad to see you're not a cat.
It sounds like he might have been like sharing his computer with his kid or
Oh,
something.
yeah, I don't know.
you know.
He kept saying, my assistant's working on it. He says, I assure you I'm here, and I'm not a cat.
On that note, I have to go to the litter box. I'll be right back.
My nephew, who's I think 3 to 2.5, knows how to. He can push buttons and turn himself into a fish or turn himself into an astronaut, and he loves to sort of talk to me from outer space or underwater.
Great.
Yeah.
Where's he live?
He's in DC, Washington, DC.
Okay, yeah.
There's Marjorie.
Marjorie has joined us, it looks like.
Yep.
So let's wait for Brett for a second.
Hi,
Hi, Marjorie.
how are you?
How is Bangor?
I just walked through the door, sorry.
Oh, don't apologize to us.
We don't see your picture.
That's okay. If you saw my picture, then I wouldn't be able to be on the internet.
Well, I don't know.
There's something
There's a lot
about,
of stuff on the internet.
there's something about my bandwidth or something on this. If it takes more BTUs, and then it kills it.
Ah, got you. It's a bandwidth problem.
Okay.
That's what happens when you live out there in the boonies.
So no, I'm all smiling at you. Hey, did you see that thing on Surrey for the campground?
Thing on Surrey for the campground.
The GAMP. I sent it to Jesse. Did you see it, Jesse?
I did.
I know they approved one, or they were going to approve one there.
Well,
Yeah,
there have,
there's an article in the Ellsworth American about it opening this spring.
March, they're having stargazing for $390 a night.
Huh. I'd only charge them $250 to come look at stars at my house.
But you're the star, Mark.
Thank you, Marjorie. Okay, we don't know whether Brett's going to show up. That's James, are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay, we'll call the meeting to order. Call the Tremont Planning Board meeting of, I got to look and see what date it is, February 9th to order. Roll call, Jeff Young,
Present.
okay. Lawson Wilson,
I'm here.
Marjorie Buck,
I'm here too.
myself, Mark Good, and CEO Jesse Dunbar. We don't have Jan tonight?
She's working on it. It was giving her some trouble.
Oh, should we wait for her or?
No, that's okay.
Okay, and James Collier, and
Hi.
he's present as well, and it looks like Becky Hopkins.
Hi, James.
Bonjour, comment ça va?
Yeah, back to you.
Okay, excused absences, we want to wait on Brett. Oh, here he is now. Okay,
Coming in now.
hi, Brett.
There's Jan.
Let's note that Jan, yeah, hi, Jan. Let's note that Brett's here at 6:04. Can you hear us, Brett?
Which way is the wind blowing, Brett?
Looks like he had to go off and come back.
Gotta give
James,
up my
that
cigars,
view-
James.
Too many cigars.
You're not doing those, are you, James?
I only smoke 3 or 4 a day,
Do you really?
5 or 6 on the weekends.
Brett, can you hear us okay?
I can now, yeah. I couldn't the first time around, so I had to drop and sign back in.
We
Okay.
missed
You're
you.
breaking up a little bit, so.
James, it's stunting your growth.
Yeah, Yeah,
Okay,
come to 300.
let's move on. Any adjustment or adoption of the, well, we always adopt the agenda. Any adjustment of the agenda? I don't see any. Minutes. Anybody see any issues with the minutes from January 26th? I didn't see any.
I'm gone again.
Okay, I'll take a motion to approve the minutes of January 26th.
I keep on dumping out of.
I'll second the motion.
Okay, motion and a second on the table to approve the minutes of January 26th. Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor? Lawson,
Yes.
I don't know what happened.
Jeff,
Yes.
Brett? People are
Yeah.
moving around here. Okay. Marjorie?
Yes.
Okay, and myself, yes. So that's unanimous. 5-0. Move on to old business, land use ordinance, site plan review ordinance, revision discussion. Don't know how you want to start tackling these. I say let's just go through from page 1 and go through, unless somebody has a better idea.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
might I suggest that we go look at my memo and go through the points in the memo first?
Okay.
Doesn't that jump us around a little bit?
It does. I tried to keep it, it does, Jeff. I tried to do A, what I thought was most important, and then B, in order chronologically in the ordinance.
But we have to go through the whole thing anyway, so what does it matter?
Oh, fill your boots then, as they say in Newfoundland.
What do you think, gang? Start from the beginning?
That's easier, I think.
Okay,
James can alert us when we trip over one of his points in his memo.
sound good, James?
Yeah,
Okay. Okay, start with the land use ordinance. We see there's a table of contents. That's good. But but would these change at all if we make some changes in the ordinance itself? The answer, I guess, is yes.
Potentially.
Potentially.
Okay,
Mark, your pagination might be off.
right. Okay, good
I see.
enough.
Also, I wanted
Is
to
the document?
mention-
Go ahead, James.
I wanted to mention that you can see that Jesse's changes are in red and mine are in blue.
Okay, good point. Yeah, I should have mentioned that. Thank you. Okay, don't see any changes right off. What's the first page here with some changes?
I have a lot of changes that are spelling, like 45, putting a hyphen in. So I
Mhm.
guess we can ignore all
I
those.
saw that and a lot of uppercase rather than
Yep.
upper and lowercase changes.
Yeah.
Don't really add much, but yeah, I understand. Might make it easier to read.
Well, speaking of which, before we get too far in there, there's this whole idea of formatting. I am big on formatting, and I think I couldn't read them. I didn't build the town, but I went through and formatted them all, both of them, before I could start to work with them.
Mhm.
They're almost unreadable because of the formatting.
I have no problems with that. The first thing I see is page 20 or 29. I'm sorry, 20, I'm sorry. And you spelled principal correctly.
Well, both ways are correct. It's
It's
just you
50,
should use it-
well, yeah, well, as in principal structure, yes. And 50-foot minimum. So you just hyphenated that.
Yeah, I've done that about a dozen,
Yeah.
2 dozen times in the ordinance.
Okay,
guess I'm not following.
Anybody have any comments? Please just jump in here, okay? Let's try to get through this as quickly as possible. The next change that I see, and please correct me if I'm wrong, is page 22. You changed the heading.
Yes.
This is a Jesse change. You struck the in the shoreland zone,
Yes,
okay, because these are land uses all over.
all over, correct. It had the original from the DEP, got stuck on it last year. We didn't notice going through that we should have changed it to just land uses.
Right.
And I've also added, it came up last week in a phone call with the DEP that several of the CFMA zones were missing a footnote. So you'll see that footnote added here. Some,
That's
when the
functionally water
DEP
dependent uses.
yeah, somehow when the DEP reviewed it and approved it in September, they also missed the fact that it was missing that footnote.
Okay, that's on page 23. And
Right.
do we need a definition for functionally water dependent uses or just water dependent uses?
Um,
I can see
Here
one. That's
already.
why I asked the question.
I would say the answer would be no, because the DEP would have had us add it last year if they required one. So they don't have one in their ordinance, in their draft ordinance.
Any comments, anybody?
The print is too small.
I agree. I have glaucoma. My sight is bad enough.
Mr. Chairman, I guess on the water dependent uses, is there someplace where there's a reason that that's important?
The DEP requires it, according to Jesse. Or do you mean the definition?
You asked if we should have a definition. My answer would be yes, if there's somewhere in the ordinance that water dependent uses comes up.
It does. Can people hear me?
Yeah,
Yep.
So if you go to page 15,
15?
E1C, it's a functionally water dependent industry. Conceptually, I think that's the same thing. It's lowercase, it's not defined. I think
Right.
because people understand what it means. It means it's something that depends on the water in order to do it.
Yep.
It seems self-explanatory. I just asked the question to be sure. I mean, what do you folks think, the rest of you?
I can
Okay,
make an argument about it, as you know. You know, because right away you're gonna get into a kayak. Is a kayak business, that's a water dependent use.
right?
I'd say that's a water dependent use. I'm not sure it's a, I think in the context, I think the context will tell you. I mean, I
Right.
think for it to be an industry dependent use, I think you'd have to make the argument that the kayak rental has to be set up on the water, which isn't true. But you have to be on the water to use it. I mean, I think it's a difference between an industry and a use.
I think,
Yeah.
I think the fact that we're struggling with defining it speaks for itself, that maybe we need to define it.
I don't agree, but I think it's pretty straightforward.
Well, that's because it's, you're looking at it from your point of view.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, Brett, because I actually think that a kayak rental shop would seem like that would be
No,
functionally
there's
water dependent,
There's one set down Southwest Harbor.
right? Okay.
No,
So
no,
I guess you could point to an example where a successful business is not,
it's right there, just makes your case, right? Because all you
Right.
gotta do is one.
and like a bike shop doesn't have to be on a bike trail.
No. I think, in one case, this is gonna be another one of these 3-hour meetings. So you know what, I'm just gonna shut up
3-hour meeting?
Or,
Okay, shut up. Keep going.
Well, I guess in the non-conforming structures section, it says all new principal and accessory structures excluding functionally water dependent uses. And then they must meet the setback. So I think that's pretty clear what that means. Wharves. Things like wharves. But I guess, you know, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. If you haven't had any problems with it in the past,
I'm okay with it.
all right,
Any objection? Otherwise, we'll move on. I think the next thing is campgrounds.
Yeah, and I just left those original ones that I had put in it back at the beginning of December,
Right.
because I know the board was going to discuss what they wanted to do, if anything, for this round of changes. So I just left the ones I'd put in there previously for discussion.
Going to your first one, which is the 50-foot setback,
Mhm.
a minimum of 50 feet from the exterior lot lines of the camping area. So to me, that means all of the current 5,000 square foot area per campsite is outside of that 50-foot setback. In other words, not
Mhm.
just the tent or whatever itself,
Right.
right? Okay,
Yep.
good. That's fine. I think the comprehensive plan definitely supports this. They've mentioned, I've got somewhere here, about how the residential business zone, in order to reduce conflicts between residential and commercial uses, strengthen the buffering and setback standards for the zone based on the intensity of the use. It goes on and on. So, I mean, there's something there in the current comprehensive plan to support increasing the setbacks. What do other people think? Do you think 50 feet's enough? It sounds good.
Well, I don't think 50 feet sets back the 5,000 square foot area. It only sets back the structure that's there.
But I think for a campground, there's no structure. And so
Where they're at.
Well,
you're
they talk,
designating an area for a tent
or shelter.
or shelter. I mean, certainly if you're building something, then that makes it that. Oh, that's interesting. So if you're going to put a cabin, a lean-to,
Right.
that's a good point. All
Or
right.
10 platforms of structure.
A tent platform, then you're like,
and I don't agree with Mark's assertion about the setback, because I'm more literal, and I think if you want the setback to be, you need to directly say the area designated for each campsite, the edge of that area shall be at least 50 foot back.
I agree with James.
I don't. see it.
Well, it does say the area intended for placement of a recreational vehicle, tent, or shelter and utility and service buildings. Okay, so the area intended for placement
Oh, you're right.
5,000 square foot area, isn't it?
That's good.
Yeah.
I take that back.
Okay,
well, I guess the other way to do it would be in paragraph 1 to say, in addition to wetland vegetation, land below the normal high water line and water body shall not be included in calculated land. We could also say
So,
area with it, like within the setback, will not be included in the 5,000 square foot per campsite. And I mean, I think that's the sort of the question that we're asking is like, how many sites per acre or per, you know, can a person fit, you know, can a project include? And is if our goal is to limit the total number of sites, then excluding the setback would be a pretty significant way to do that on a small project. That would be could be a major change.
well, I think the goal should be to protect the residential neighbors, which may end up being limiting the number of sites, but I don't think that should be the primary goal, right?
I guess I'm thinking about the Pointy Head campground as an example where the site plan had squares. If instead of squares, they were long rectangles with a tent at one end and the rest of it extending to the property line, they could have squeezed twice as many or 3 times as many.
Right, but you wouldn't be
Sites.
able to do that here with the setback because it's the area intended. So that little 5,000 square foot area, no matter how long and narrow it is, and where the tent or whatever is placed on there, it still has to be outside of the 50 foot.
I don't think that's clear. I don't think if you think that area is referring to 5,000 square feet, that we should make that connection.
Mhm.
Because I don't,
Why not just say the 5,000 square foot area intended for? James?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm confused by it.
Well, can't we put the word area in the first sentence in subparagraph 1? Campgrounds shall contain a minimum 5,000 square feet as an area per campsite.
Yeah, but I think before you do that, I think you should step back intellectually or philosophically and decide what you want to do. I think what Lawson and others were getting at was, do you want an overall area of 5,000 square feet per campsite? And therefore you get X number of acres and you figure out square footage and divide it and see how many campsites you can get. Or do you want to have campsites that are X by X, or the edge of the area that any tent or other thing is going to be in is 50 feet back? So first, philosophically, understand exactly what you want to do and then try to write it. Did I lose it?
There, okay, we're keeping, at this point, we're keeping 5,000 square feet for each campsite.
Well, for discussion purposes.
Okay, that's why I said at this point.
I was
okay,
gonna
for
raise that as-
discussion- For discussion purposes.
On a larger area or maximize the number per acre or something. So I think what we started talking about is if any areas, whether it's 5,000, 10,000, 2,000, should they at least be 50 feet back and work on setbacks first and then come back and what can go within the envelope we create with setbacks as to areas for camping.
Right, I think that none of the campsite area should be within the setback area.
I
It's gotta be
agree.
set at least 50 back from the line, okay? Do we all agree on that?
Yes.
Looks that way.
I'm
Marjorie?
not sure I do. I think that, like, I want to protect the neighbors, and I think that having a setback makes sense. But I think that I'm concerned about, like, where's the recreational vehicle, the tent and the shelter, and utility and service buildings. I think that those are the things that I want to keep away from the property line. I'm not sure that I care if there's forest, part of that 5,000 square foot, which isn't developed, but it's sort of allocated to that tent site. If that's closer than 50 feet, that might be okay. I don't know. I guess maybe the argument is that we don't want people walking in that area, or.
And while I don't agree or disagree, of course, because I'm not on the board, I just want you to be aware that that's a huge increase in the amount of area that you're going to need, right? If you don't count it with stuff within the 50-foot setback. For example, if your thing was, say, 100 feet long, it's 100 times 50. And then you have to have that much more square footage. I'm not for or against it, but I'm just saying, be aware that you take that position, that you're not going to count the area within the setback. That's a huge amount. Also, it's usually not done that way, just in zoning in general.
Lawson, from what I hear you saying, okay, you are only concerned about, let's say, the recreational vehicle that you use
Right.
being 50 feet away from the property line.
Yep.
But that means that some of that 5,000 square foot can be within the set, what we're proposing for a setback. So why can't I just have a campfire there? In that case, it's not a 50-foot setback.
Well, yeah. So I guess the question is like, what are we limiting? And maybe Mark and I think Jeff too are suggesting that we're trying to limit any sort of human intervention or like camping activities within the setback. And if that's the case, okay, like I could maybe get on board with that, but that seems like a very significant change in sort of reducing the total sort of developable area or usable area, not developable, just usable.
I don't think it's draconian in any way. I think it's responsible zoning.
Sure.
I think other towns have this sort of setback. I mean, what's happened? You were only for one campground. I've been on the board for two. What has been the biggest objection to the residential neighbors and having this activity right next to them? We're trying to protect them in some way by giving them a little bit of a setback, more of a setback. And it's in the comprehensive plan. It's even telling us that, this should be done.
I guess, and I think that's great, but we should probably be even more, and I think we're getting there by trying to define the area. But if I'm a homeowner, I have a 15-foot setback to build a building, but I could have a campfire or plant a tree or build a fence or there are lots of things I can do within the setback. And I think that, so when I read setback, if I was developing a campground, I would think it would be absolutely okay to put a picnic table in the setback. Unless we, today are saying you're not allowed to put a picnic table or a hiking trail or a bird feeder. I mean, I don't know how far we want to go in defining what behavior, what you're allowed to do within the setback.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Lawson. I would red line out of the camping area.
I'm sorry, you do what? I missed what you said.
It said to take out of the camping area
So in number 3,
in number 3.
50 feet from the exterior lot lines and take out the camping area.
Yep.
And this is what we're trying to do. I think that's what Lawson's saying, because basically what 3 says, 3 lists some things, sort of structures, and there's a setback. And what's confusing to me is I get a setback 50 feet from lot lines, but I don't know what it means 50 feet from the exterior lot lines of the camping area. I mean, what is that? Like, I don't know what that is. It's not even.
I'm sorry, I didn't catch the end of what you're saying. You are breaking up. I don't know for
breaking up
anybody
a little
else or just me.
I think you're just far away from your microphone, Brett.
Or actually, maybe I've got papers on it. Is it better now?
Yeah.
Yes, much better.
I would cross out of the camping area. I don't know what that language adds. Does it add something? Was that intentional? I don't know who drafted this.
I put that in, and I believe it was, I took it out of Bar Harbor's ordinance, I believe.
Because when I look at D3, I mean, what it gets to is, I think what Lawson was getting to, it's like, look, it's the things like, it's the things that people can see. It's the service buildings, it's whatnot. You want that back. I don't know what it means of the camping area. I just think it's 50 feet from the exterior of the lot lines. Then if you want to add things to the list of what needs to be 50 feet back, we could do that. And you could have a separate section for fires or something like that. It makes sense to do, maybe if you have a separate section for fires. But I think that for me the confusion is of the camping area, because to me it changes what you're measuring from.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas lot lines, I get that. I mean, it's just the lot lines. It's 50 feet
Right.
long.
Yep. So Mark, what if we added fire pits, picnic tables, I don't know what else, to the list on 3.
How about if we just left it at camping 50 feet from the exterior lot lines? Anything to do with camping instead of,
Well, I don't think that's very specific. I mean, does that include hiking or like going for a walk through the woods?
well, yeah, anything to do with camping. I don't care if it's hanging out their dirty laundry. Keep
But,
it
You
50
know,
feet.
to Lawson's point, I mean, you can, that really clamps down on someone's land, right? I mean, the setback from my garage, or whatever, is 25 feet. I park a car in between that. I park a car in that space because I can do that. So now you're basically saying you're just removing from the peripheral of the entire property a 50-foot swath that you basically take away. I think we want to be a little more targeted in how we take it away, if you will.
Let me get in on that a bit. I think that there's a rationale for that. There's a thought process to that, right? Because the nature of the use is not the same. With your land and your house and any residential use, it's for your residence and you can use every square inch of it. There's structure setbacks, but there's usually not use setbacks. Here, camping is considered by some to be a noxious use that's offensive to the neighbors. So yeah, you're taking out a lot of their land, but the use, you're limiting where the use can be. Because the use is not strictly, by definition, within a structure, the use is traveling around the lot in a way that it wouldn't otherwise be. So it's more like a commercial activity, which it is, that has escaped from the building out to the edge of the lot line. And I think that's why it's markedly different than a residential use. 50 feet, I don't know if that's a lot, too much. I don't like camping and I'd make it 1,000, but
And also, it would not prohibit walking through the area, like a hiking trail like Brett was referring to, because that would not be the camping area. The camping area refers strictly to that 5,000 square foot area for the tent, cabin, recreational vehicle.
Picnic table, fire pit,
Yeah.
clothesline.
I think the thing to do there is this, I don't know who mentioned it, but is to say something like, I think it was Marjorie, you have a setback for all camping structures, however you define them, and camping activities, such as, and then give a bunch of examples. See what I mean? So there's camping structures, then there's camping activities such as hiking, drinking beer, having a fire, whatever else you do on campsites, and give examples.
Jesse, what'd you think about that?
That's fine. If that's what the consensus is, we can,
I mean, that's basically what it does. I mean, the list there now at 3 is basically structures. You just create a set of uses. I still think I still don't know how you interpret the exterior lot lines of the camping area, because that's going to move. You're essentially creating lots within the lot, right? The 5,000 square foot lots. So that just feels weird to me. I still think you get rid of the camping area. What we're doing is it's another way to get at the buffering issue, right? You're just creating more space.
right.
Not from some line that's the camping area. That frankly is going to have an interior line. It's going to have, if you define it that way, it's going to have 4, sides.
Right.
It's not going to be on the exterior of the lot. So,
Right. I agree with Brett.
I think you could have like placement of structures such as, and blah, 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 or uses such as, I think the big one's going to be fires, right? I mean, you just don't want.
Yeah.
Well, I actually think that like walking and drinking beer are also like it. I've heard some people suggest that should not happen within the setback. And if that's true, then I think we need to be very explicit about that, because that's something that, I don't know, would be certainly hard to enforce, but nevertheless, that's not our job. But like, we could at least like make it explicit that like, no, like we're essentially asking the campground owner to build a fence, or, you know, whether it's physical or like a virtual, that's 50 feet away, and that people should not go outside, between, there should be no sort of human activity within that 50-foot buffer. And I'm not sure that that's what we want, but that would make it clearer, I think.
I don't think that we need to prohibit human activity within that buffer area.
I don't think
I'm
you'd be
just
able- I don't
concerned
think
about
you'd
the
be able to-
campsite itself.
You're not gonna be able to enforce it.
So that but I think we can enforce fire pits, picnic tables, clotheslines. Like
Yeah.
those would be like visible things. And if we add those items to tent, shelter, utility, recreational vehicle, and as long as that stuff stays outside of 50 feet.
I mean, you move the fire pit, the beer drinking is going to go with that.
That's right. Yeah.
Sounds like you've been there before, Brett. You want to move on for a second and return to this at some point? Or does somebody have a better suggestion? Somebody want to,
Well, I think, we get into all this, whether you can walk on the land in the 50 feet, and I think we're getting into a difficult area there. So I'm very much on the structure side, being easier to regulate and keep track of. But if you bring in another issue that's going to come up in our discussion is the buffer itself. And we haven't gotten to that topic yet, and it's coming up real quick, is that once you if we put a buffer in that's, certain pine trees and evergreens and permanent buffer, that would sort of solve some of these other issues where you can walk on or drink a beer there or take a pee there, whatever's going to happen. But I think that the buffering aspect will sort of mediate some of those low impact uses within the 50 feet.
Yeah, these things work together, right? They kind of,
Yeah.
How about, if you want to move on, but how about something that you add in something like, you have the things that are there, the tents and other stuff, and then accessory uses normally associated with camping, such as fire
fire
pits.
pits and that sort of thing, yeah.
You could limit those, and that is enforceable. Because code enforcement officer could go over and say, for the past 3 years, they've had the picnic tables 3 feet from the line. That's a violation. Or there's fire pits that are 10 feet from the line, that's a violation. So if you give examples and use stuff like fire pits, clotheslines, things that you can see, I think that might be a good compromise. That still allows a bit of walking, possibly dope smoking, beer drinking.
Jim?
So I think there are 3 changes, and then maybe we can move on. In paragraph 1, I think it was Jeff, somebody suggested adding the word area after 5,000 square feet. I think that helps. And then in paragraph 3, James's suggestion of adding and accessory uses such as fire pits, clotheslines, and picnic tables. And then Brett's suggestion of eliminating of the camping area at the end of the first sentence in paragraph 3.
Yep.
And I feel like if we do those 3 things, that seems to capture the setback issue. In my mind.
Yep.
Jim, is it permissible on an ordinance say such as fire pits, picnic tables, clotheslines, but not limited to? Is that become a legal issue?
The not limited to is only for lawyers.
I know. That's why I like it.
Yeah, such as is used all the time.
Okay.
Then you can argue about it later. But
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
it also gives the board discretion to say, such as means, God knows what they're gonna say it means, and then let that go to court and figure it out later. But if you say this and not limited to that, that's dangerous because then you get into being specific. And I don't think you want to be specific. I think your idea is to give a general category. There's a whole line of cases on this, starting with the Lincolnville Beach case of conserving natural beauty, how you define standards. So I like that phrase, such as, and give some examples.
Fine. You answer what I want to know.
So I could live with what Lawson suggested in incorporating other ideas. What do other people think?
Yeah, I can live with it.
So Jesse, you could make those changes?
Yep.
Okay. Let's move on then. Campground should be screened from all abutting areas.
What number are we at?
Uh,
Next one?
25, campgrounds, D. Actually, 3's crossed. It's part of 3, I guess, yeah.
Okay.
Would this already be covered by our buffering standards in the ordinance?
No.
Because
Are you referring to paragraph 3 that we just talked about, or is there some other buffering?
The last line of paragraph 3 that used to be
Yeah.
called 3 is crossed out.
yeah, campground shall be screened from all abutting areas.
And sorry, Mark, you think that that's covered under what?
Our buffering standards. I didn't say I think so. I asked the question is it covered by our buffering standards?
I have an issue with the campground shall be screened because we don't know. I think more important, just as important as screening the campground, screening the structures that are within it. So for instance, suppose we got an application, had these platforms that were elevated, which I don't know why people do that.
Hypothetically.
But just hypothetically.
It could happen. That's just, you just say that for sake of argument, okay?
Yeah, I just, dreamt this up the other night. And so let's say these structures are 6 or 8 feet off the ground, these platforms, and then a tent goes on top of that. Our buffering ordinances doesn't address that issue. But if you just say screen the campground's screened. It's just that the structures could, with these platform things, rise well above any screening required in our buffering ordinance.
When you guys are talking about the buffering ordinance, are you talking about page 32? I don't know, that's just where I went. What is this? Paragraph. Oh, what is it? D on page 32? Is that what you mean by the buffer? I just want to make sure we're clear, because I actually think, Jeff, that the first sentence there where it says complete visual screening of activity on the lot would address what you're talking about a tower, a tent tower.
Right.
Is that the right visual buffering standard? Because I agree. I think to Mark's point, maybe we don't need a paragraph in campgrounds about screening if all business uses we're suggesting need to have visual buffering. And then we might need to clarify and define exactly what we mean by visual buffering and wordsmith that section. But
why not just leave it in and say the campground shall be screened from all abutting areas according to the buffering standards, and then in the ordinance.
I guess because I worry about sort of redundancy or something, but I guess I would look at Jim for that. Like, is it useful to have 2 paragraphs that are sort of pointing at each other?
and it sometimes can clarify, yeah, it's not, yeah. Yep. I'm lost. Were you looking at is that under the land use or is?
I'm in the land use ordinance, page 32. It's the bottom of page 32, paragraph D. It's called visual buffering. And I think that's as specific as we get in the ordinance, although maybe there's some other place that I don't know about, but
Well, there's
Page
some perform-
33. the next-
33. There's some performance standards too that cover buffering.
I think what I would say is, I think you could do a cross-reference. You would just make it very explicit and say that, I mean, I would use the campground shall be, shall be subject to the visual buffering requirements and then cite that section below. So it's just clear, that's where you go. There's a cross-reference to where you go.
That makes sense. That's kind of what I was trying to suggest.
And then it's just, you just get it locked in. You know that that's what applies. It kicks you down to page 33.
That makes sense, Brett.
And to address,
He ought to be a lawyer, huh?
I play one on TV sometimes.
Yeah, just don't play like some of the ones I saw on TV tonight, huh?
to address someone's point, I think it might have been Jeff's, that about the thing being up so high. As I stated at the last planning board meeting, the way you have it now, if you just refer to the buffering standards, that leaves your planning board lots of discretion. So that means, if you have a glamping thing 20 feet in the air, the answer is no. You just have to have the cojones and say, no, that won't do, because you won't be adequately screened. So I think it's fine the way it is. The board just has to say no if it's up in the air. If it's up in the air and it's too close, you're gonna have to have trees 100 feet tall or whatever. And if you can't do that, then the answer is no, the application gets turned down. I like boards having discretion.
I want to point out something, a discrepancy that relates to this, as soon as I can find it. In the site plan review ordinance, oh, okay, here. Article 8, 3E talks about elevations. And it only specifies that the plan indicate ground floor elevations. That would not cover what we're talking about. We wouldn't know from the plan unless we ask, oh, how high and are these going to be, right? I think the elevations, the total elevation, the height of the structure should be somewhere in there indicated that that's needed on the plan.
it's
Does that make
gotta be
sense?
here. It's not here.
What's that?
You mean the elevations of the structures?
What page are you on, Mark?
Page
Site plan
14.
review, Article 8, 3E.
What page
If
is that?
that's existing, I would actually go to
Well, I'm
paragraph
looking at,
4.
I don't know on what page. I got
It's
this from our
14.
existing.
Page 14.
Off of page 14.
But I would actually go below to proposed development activity, which is paragraph 4. And I think we're close in paragraph 4F, which says location, dimensions, and ground floor elevation of all proposed buildings or building expansions. And maybe what we also need to have is dimensions like horizontal and vertical dimensions. And or require, elevation drawings, like,
Right.
of,
Well, I'm confused by what you said. In F, it says the location, dimensions, and ground floor elevation.
right. So I'm suggesting that if we also know the dimensions, it's not clear which dimensions we're asking for.
That's true.
And so if we ask for, and maybe it's horizontal and vertical, or maybe there's a better term,
Yeah, I'm against that. I'm strongly against that. I just went through this in Lemoyne. If I build something, it's none of your business how tall it is. The question is whether it's under the maximum amount. The ground floor elevations are so that you can tell the code enforcement officer if he or she needs it later, if they need to measure, if there's a question of how high it was, so you can get them on the hook. But I don't want to be told that I have to tell you how high my building is going to be, because then you might approve it on the fact that it's 22 feet. And my answer was, screw you, I have a maximum of 35. And so if I want to build it to 34.6, then I can. So I really don't like the elevation. You shouldn't have to put those in.
Well, doesn't it just contradict what you said about the tent platforms and the buffering?
How is this relevant if we tell them that they have to comply with visual buffering? I don't care how high it is. They have to screen it. It can't be viewed.
Okay.
I'm with Brett on that.
Okay.
If you're looking at buffering and you say, listen, I'm in the neighbor and I look over, then the board can always request additional information, such as how high those those platforms gonna be. You can always ask.
What do you think, folks?
But then can we say no because they are too high?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, and
But
I
we
think
have
that
to-
the idea that the burden of proof is on the applicant to
Right.
demonstrate that buffering has been achieved is great. And if they don't tell us how high stuff is going to be and we have questions about that, we ask. And if they still don't answer, then they haven't met the burden of proof and they don't pass.
And the board can say, oh, they're gonna be 10 feet high. Well, we need trees 15 feet high. Oh, they're gonna be 15 feet high. Well, you need trees that are 20. Oh, they're gonna be 50 feet high. That's too tall because trees around here don't grow that high. So, I think it's fine the way it is now.
But James, what if it is 10 feet tall, the platform, but the top of their structure actually is 20 feet tall
Then I think the buffering has to be adequate.
to a 20-foot tall, not to the platform?
I think you need to make it up as you look at it. You look at the buffering plan and make a decision.
Yep.
We all know trees thin out, right? So depending on the type of tree, it's like all buffering. I think it's fine the way it is now. Look at the buffering plan. They have to prove to you. Lawson, I think, said, they have the burden of proof. They must prove to you that the buffering will be adequate to do all the stuff in the buffering standards. So I really don't care how tall it is. Is the buffering adequate? And you make up your mind.
Everybody agree with that, or?
Yes.
Okay. Next one, each recreational vehicle, tent, or shelter site shall be provided with a trash receptacle. And I see James has added 30 gallons or more or larger.
Yeah,
Which makes sense. So you don't have a little wastebasket there.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't care about the 30 gallons. I just thought some people would put little tiny ones. Maybe that's okay with you, but I think you should put a limit of some kind, a minimum
That
size.
makes sense to me. Is 30 gallons the typical trash can?
Yeah.
Okay. Anybody else have anything to say about that? Okay. I don't see where there's anything else here, but for discussion's sake, I think we should include something to ensure safe campfires, requiring like a fire ring, masonry structure, or something similar. What do you folks think?
I think that makes sense. Is there any language from one of the ordinances that you sent around, Mark, that?
Yeah, I did see it. I don't remember exactly
Sense.
which ones. It might have been Blue Hill. Actually, might have been more than one.
But also we have to, a lot of the times when we're in a drought, there's no campfires, so somebody has to be there to let them know that. Even if you have a great ring.
But that's not the job of the planning board, though.
Oh, that's true. That's true. That's where Becky comes in.
So Blue Hill says each campsite shall be equipped with a masonry or metal fireplace, the construction of which is approved by the Blue Hill Fire Chief.
Okay, yeah.
Will he come over? Never mind.
Yeah.
For a price. I mean, that's another thing that we should consider, is fire chief or his or her designee's approval,
Sure.
to make sure good access throughout the site for firefighting equipment and also to ensure fire safety. I mean, that might even be something that should be included in the site plan review ordinance period for any major project.
We know the park restricts all fires to their rings. So as a concept, it's not foreign at all on the island.
No, I spoke briefly to our fire chief, who thought it was a good idea.
And I think you can go either with Lawson saying they have in Blue Hill, you can go with constructed pits or just circles of rocks. You put something in, and then, but I think the important part to not lose is that to the satisfaction of the fire chief. Then the plan comes in, the fire chief has to look at it, get an understanding of what was supposed to be there. And then if there are complaints, you talk to the fire chief talks to the CEO, and you can file a thing, because what you're going to say is they built X and they promised Y. So I like that idea of using the part as approved by the fire chief.
Yeah.
Right. Or his or her designee, I would say,
Yeah.
because if the fire chief's out of town on vacation or something, maybe the assistant chief or somebody would.
Yeah, I think you don't put it in there. You put that some result in the ordinance, which says the code enforcement officer shall mean person designated for the job and or his or her designee. That's a provision that goes elsewhere under the definition of the code enforcement officer. That way you don't repeat it 15 times.
Okay, any questions, people?
Nope.
Any comments? You all set with that? You think that's a good idea? Okay. Another thing which I saw in a lot of the ordinances was a minimum lot size for a campground. What are the thoughts about that?
Well, you're talking about the parcel of property as a total.
Right. Right now, under our ordinance, 40,000 square feet, you could have a campground. You're limited by the number of campsites, of course, you can have on there, but you can have a campground with less than an acre of property. I saw some 2 acres. Lemoyne has a 20 acre limit. 5 might be a good place to start.
Do we have any other minimum lot size for use based on in the ordinance? Do we limit the house? I don't know if you want to have a boatyard, how small lot that is, or if you want to have a hotel, how small lot that is.
I think pretty much everything's 40,000 square feet per use or per structure.
And then accessory structures require additional 20,000, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think, Mark, I intellectually, I like the concept, but as far as thinking about people's homes and their property and so forth, I'm not sure it's going to fly real well in the community by the smaller parcel owners being handcuffed by that. I think with our setback requirements, it might have the effect we want it to have without going to a lot size, but that's just.
Well, that's a good point.
And I guess I was going to bring up, if you didn't, whether we want to look at, this is a real can of worms, the 5,000 square feet. And we could adjust that in some way too, which would affect how many can get packed in on any piece of property, most particularly smaller ones.
5,000 line up to other towns or whatever, other areas.
Are you saying less or more than 5,000 square feet?
Well, I'm asking what is the minimum size for a campsite in Bar Harbor or Lemoyne or
Blue Hill is 20 tent sites per acre. So that's
Yeah, Blue Hills didn't have that great an ordinance, if you ask me. So,
all right. I'll switch there.
I don't know what Bar Harbor is. Jesse, you have an idea?
I'm
James?
looking at it now.
That's only 2,200 square feet.
5,000.
Right.
Bar Harbor's 5,000 square feet.
they have a limited.
Sorry, it's 5,000 square feet in shoreland, 2,500 square feet in inland.
It's even less.
And remember, 5,000 square feet doesn't mean a square or rectangle, as we found out on Mr. Hopkins and Ms. Hopkins' other campground that Greg was very creative when we asked for the 5,000 square feet, and he got it, and it's an interesting little map he has.
I think Mr. Chairman, if I may, the larger problem, the elephant in the room that you haven't talked about is the concept that correct me if I'm wrong, that you allow mixed residential and commercial uses.
Or the residential business zone, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. We know.
Is by definition commercial, and therefore I would think, as a matter of zoning, not a personal belief, abhorrent to a residential use. And so I think the other problem that you should think about is, should you ban it altogether from residential zones? And that would fix your problem. You can have small lots with campgrounds on them, but if they're not residential zones, you have no problem. I think the problem you have is if you have a mixed use and a campground next to a house, you've got a problem.
I would agree, James, and certainly that is something to me that should be addressed. I don't see that happening right away. We do have a comprehensive plan underway. Well, we will have a comprehensive plan underway, and hopefully that sort of issue gets addressed at that point. There's no way that, in my opinion, there's no way that we can just ban business uses in the residential business zone or change that zone at a town meeting. I don't see what's going to be.
You can't, but the voters can.
No, the voters. I don't think the voters will go for it at this
Yeah,
point.
but what I'm saying is, I think if you're not going to tackle that issue, then you should just leave it at 5,000, put that on the list for the comprehensive plan stuff and move on. Because really what you started in was, should we tackle those size area? And I think your question really was, should we deal with the mixture of uses? I think that's really the question. So if you're not going to deal with it, let it go to comprehensive plan and so on.
Comments, folks?
Well, I completely agree. We're not going to tackle it as part of this, what we're trying to accomplish here. To me, we're just trying to tighten up the campground ordinance a little bit, because what we had there was just very, very sparse and just really didn't do much at all. In fact, it's frankly hard for applicants to even know what's required of them, and it was hard for us to know what to require. But tackling the overall residential business use issue within Tremont is not something I don't think we're going to do as part of
Exactly.
on my house for the next month or so.
So the question remains, okay, do we want 5,000 square feet to stay,
Yeah,
or do we want more?
We do, because I heard it's even smaller in Bar Harbor. It sounds like it was smaller. I was just curious if we're out of whack. It sounds like we're not. So the only other thing we would do if we were trying to tighten it up would be to make the lot size bigger. But if we have if it's all 40,000 square feet for everything, I think we just got to leave it for now, and it becomes part of the larger comprehensive plan discussion.
Okay, and so you say leave it at 5,000 square feet.
Even at 5,000 square feet and don't touch the minimum lot size. It takes care of it. So I think we have addressed it a little bit with the setback. You know, you kind of squeeze it a little bit, and some of that might take care of itself. And also, frankly, the visual buffering, that's a lot of money. Depending, you know, you can't just, if you're right next to someone's house and you've got a field, that's going to require a significant investment. If you get a relatively small area, it's not going to, the ROI probably isn't going to be there.
I agree. You know, I think we just have to do what we can
What we can right now.
to tighten things up a little bit for now to keep the neighbors happy and move on from there with a comprehensive plan, I guess. I don't know. Other comments? Jeff, you were the one who suggested it.
Well, I'm going to back away from it because I'm more concerned we get a Band-Aid in place to help out some of the situations that we think might be coming in sooner than later, and let it all drift over to the comprehensive plan and let the town feel its way through it a little bit more, rather than us trying to take this all through and losing everything.
Right. I'm afraid of throwing too much at the voters as well. Okay, so we're going to leave it minimum, the lot size as it is, and we're going to leave the 5,000 square feet as is, correct?
Yeah, and comparing it to Bar Harbor, looks like we got a good deal. I mean, they're only 2,500 interior, so it's the present statute gives us more than some of our communities around us.
Okay, anything else you think? I noticed some of the ordinances had something about the number of toilets per campsite, but I don't think we want to go there either at this point. Well, hearing nothing or nothing else, we'll move on. How's that sound? So Jesse, you're all set on the change? Okay.
Yep, I'll make those.
Okay, I see the next change that you suggest is on page 31. And you eliminated the campground exception to business uses.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a crucial change that I really think we need in there. Taking that out gives us more teeth in our planning capabilities as a campground comes forward.
In the visual buffering, you know.
There, in fact, in the last, with the pointy head situation, in fact, the attorney representing the neighbors actually quoted this section, which it didn't apply, which luckily it didn't come out and we didn't use it. But when I was reading his brief and what he submitted, I'm like, this doesn't work, and realizing we should get that out of there. So it gives us the ability to look at this section, because it gives us a lot of control over campgrounds.
Okay, so we're okay with that change.
Yeah. I mean, because at the end of the day, it is a business use, I think.
Yeah.
Oh, of course, yeah, that's. Okay. Anybody see the next one? I haven't gotten there yet.
Page
The
40,
next one. Yep.
Which page?
41.
Yep.
Oh, okay. Health institutions. Hotels, inns, cabins, cottages, and campgrounds, actually, under C.
Yeah, previously their campgrounds weren't listed under parking standards.
Okay,
That's
okay.
an issue you've raised a number of times, Mark.
One for every sleeping room. So we're gonna call a tent a sleeping room, I guess,
Yeah, you're gonna
and,
have to add something.
and one per every 2 employees.
You're gonna have to add something, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, to better define that sleeping room.
Yeah, sleeping room, camping site, something.
Site, yeah. Sleeping room,
Jesse will come up with
Or
something.
camps and
Campsite.
campsite, or campsite, yeah.
Yep.
That sound good, James?
I don't, Jesse will come up with something. He'll send it to me, I'll criticize it.
the next one I had was on page 52.
52. That's
That hits,
51.
Oh,
52? Oh,
yeah,
I see.
30 to 90. Why are we putting that in there, Jesse?
The issue came up when I was dealing with a who's going to be applying for a food truck permit, and she was a little nervous about the fact that she's going to invest in doing a food truck business for the season, and if I issue her a permit in May, it's only valid for 30 days. It makes a little more sense in this area that you would issue one for the season. And have it, valid for June, July, August.
This only applies to temporary sales of food or merchandise.
Yes, yep. It seemed like a lot of work to have to go through re-permitting it every 30 days during the summer season.
And work for the code enforcement officer as well.
Yes.
Right.
We'll come back once anyway.
Sounds good to me. Anybody have any complaints?
No,
Okay,
59.
I don't know if you want to rethink this, Jesse, or not, but
Yep.
I don't know, maybe you should talk to a couple other code enforcement officers,
Okay.
like Kim Keene, and see, because my issue, and the people in Winter Harbor, because it's a check if you have 30 days with this woman that wants to do it. If she puts in, but she's an idiot and she's, making a mess. Boy, you want to get rid of that permit after 30 days. So I guess I'm not for or against it, but I think you should just talk to a few other code
Okay.
enforcement officers, see what they say.
Okay.
See what they think about that.
Yep.
okay, 59. Change of use, commercial to residential only under
Actually, you skipped 58.
58. Oh, sorry. Oh, okay.
You have to break in when I'm talking about.
Oh, okay. I was wondering who was talking. Okay, code enforcement officer review authority, single family residential construction. Oh, just hyphenated there, James.
Before that,
Oh, up above.
under, I have it at 57. Jesse's got a change there in the nonconformity section.
I took that out, James, after I talked to you.
Okay,
Yeah, there are some changes on 57, but they're all just housekeeping, renumbering and lettering.
yeah, but there was one that said, if 2 or more principal use of structures existed on a single non-conforming, he had to add a non-conforming lot of record. And I was very confused about that. Jesse had a point, but I just didn't like his point. I think it's got to do
You
with.
talked me out of it.
I talked you out of it, so let's move on.
Comments, anybody?
You don't want, that's in the weeds. You don't want to get into that.
Okay, let's go to 58 then. We see up above some renumbering, then down to the single family hyphenated, and then commercial additions review authority, commercial additions 100 square feet or less?
I changed it here to 600 based on the site plan review ordinance allows the code officer to do up to 600 square feet.
Okay, well, if this is going to
Less.
happen, we're going to change that 100 to 6, the 1 to a 6, where it's written out.
It is on mine, is it not on yours? Oh,
Nope.
sorry, the text, yes.
Yeah, the text. I
Yep.
just have it in parentheses, 600.
Yep.
Comments? Okay, move on. 59. Change of use. Commercial to residential only.
This change I put in from if it's currently a commercial space that's going to be turned into a residential, or usually it would be back to a residential space. We had one case in Southwest, and it usually ended up being most things weren't applicable, so it was kind of a waste of time for the planning board to go through all these standards from going over to residential. So that's the basis for that change.
So essentially, if I had a small store and I decided I didn't want to have a store anymore, I could make it into residential use or turn it into a residence. And that would just require your approval, not the planning board's.
Correct.
Let's agree with that one.
Anybody else have any comments? Looks good to me. And I see you down below, you have excluding commercial to residential.
Yep, so just the reverse.
Yeah.
There's another little technical change there onto the planning board,
Yep,
following Mark's earlier thing. Greater than
yes,
600 and.
Yep.
or-
thank you.
Okay.
Page 60 is our changes, James.
Okay. So this is some of the integration language, correct, James? You want to
Yeah.
explain?
No, well, I just thought that to start with, under the Tremont plan, site plan review ordinance, at the top of page 60, tells you where you're going. Mr. Atherton pointed out, Mel Atherton pointed out that it was in there, but it was so confusing to me. So I thought by saying under the Tremont site plan review ordinance, you knew where to go. Same thing in number 9, down below at the bottom of the page. Site plan approval under the site plan review ordinance. Then moving on, page 62, Jesse, that's yours,
Yep,
9 copies.
yep, this is where we talked about the 14-day
Okay, it's, yeah,
deadline for submitting applications.
I think that's an excellent idea. Can't
Yes.
believe you hadn't had it yet before this.
Yeah,
and now any subsequent filing or information, we would just have to, we're not going to set a deadline for that, or are we?
Well, that I think, because of the lawyers in the room, there's 2 ways to approach this. Number one is you can put a whole bunch of deadlines in there. I don't like that. I like the chair to be able to say at the end of each meeting, where you're doing a big application with a lot of stuff in it. And I remind, just before you ask for a motion to adjourn, you say, and I remind the applicant that any additional submissions must be X number of days. Any other submissions from abutters be so many days after that, and any rebuttal from the applicant so many days after that. Generally, it's 7, 4, and 2, I think, something like that. There's, you can make that up yourself.
Do we need language in authorizing the chairman and have that, or the board to have that ability to control the time frame?
I don't think so, but it's like I said, maybe you were napping there, but I tried to get a kick in at the lawyers. Lawyers always like that language because they like to be very specific. It depends on your view of the world, Jeff.
Well, my view, having gotten rid of that law license, but now as a board member,
Hey,
I
get rid of it.
yeah, I did. I don't want to, I'm in recovery. I don't want to have a written document presented to me at a meeting that I have to read. I want to see it before the meeting.
I'd like to see it in our packet.
And so,
That's what I want to avoid, like, as a recent application we had the applicant come up and hand us things right
Yeah.
before the meeting. And
I think you have the ability to refuse that, though.
pardon?
You have the ability to refuse that.
Yeah, which we did.
Yeah. What do you have do you have a planning board rules? Do you have a planning board ordinance?
Yeah, we have ordinance and we have bylaws.
That's where it should be.
I don't,
no, there's nothing in the bylaws about that.
Well, it shouldn't be in here. It should be in the bylaws or the planning board ordinance.
we
That's
just
the,
changed our bylaws and they were approved by the selectmen, their last meeting, so.
oh, the selectmen can change them? Even better.
No, we can change them and the selectmen have to approve our changes.
Great. I think you should change those.
The bylaws, and we just went through it. It could be the ordinance has to go to town meeting, the ordinance to create the planning board. But we could just do it ourselves. I'd hate to go before them again. Okay. Everybody okay with this? And the chair, somebody kick me or something at every meeting that I'm at and remind me to tell the applicant they have so much time. And maybe Jesse, you and I can get together and discuss what appropriate time frame for those.
Yeah,
In the
I think
packet.
I'll look at, I know the Board of Appeals ordinance has a similar time frame, 7/3. So we'll see what that says.
And then I think it might be a good idea if Jesse puts it in his notes of things to do later, or maybe Mark can, or both of you, the next go around, if you're gonna change the bylaws, get it in there.
Okay. If I live that long. Everybody okay with that?
Kevin just heard it on the other side of the table.
Uh-oh. Okay, page 68, James, what's this? Wow, on every application for a permit for the CEO, we should talk.
Yeah, what can I say? I was shocked and appalled.
I would remove it, but I don't want to cause an issue.
Where did it come from, Mark? You've been over there a while.
So, wait, what is it referring to? The one above that, A? Or
No,
F?
it's referring to B.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
No, it's referring to A.
A?
I just can't believe that everything that
Oh,
comes from
yeah.
Jesse gets sent out to all the abutters. That's just crazy.
Why?
Oh my God, why? You do anything in your house, your neighbor gets notice of it? Wow.
Well, it's not everything in the house or anything in the house.
Well, the code enforcement officer is not looking at big projects, right? And the effect on the neighbor is relatively small. And I've dealt with probably 15 or 20 ordinances around Hancock County and outside of Hancock County. I don't think I've ever seen this. So I said, wow,
Aren't we-
I was shocked.
Aren't we just talking about land use applications?
Yeah. it's typical to give notice to everybody when it's something before the planning board, but not stuff to the code enforcement officer. I just want to know how that got in there. Somebody was.
Your
picking
thoughts,
a pool at
Jesse?
some point. Mark, you're old.
I don't have a response.
You don't have to tell me,
It
James.
says.
Well, you're old, Mark, and what happened? Do you remember?
No, I haven't been on the board this long.
You've been around longer than anybody around here.
Well,
Jesse, is that how it is in Southwest, or do you know?
Yes, it is that way in Southwest.
Equally crazy.
Southwest.
I know it's not that way in Mount Desert.
Not that way in Bar Harbor. Well, I'm gonna leave that to Jesse. That's a battle for him, and when he's not, when he has other jobs and other responsibilities, or if he wants to tackle that in the next couple of months, it's a really political, I guess, is what I'm saying. So
How
No
are we
comment.
defining a budding property owner in this case?
everybody,
The touching.
Actually touching the piece of property. I
Yeah,
don't see where
or
that's a
across the
big
street.
deal. That's a big deal. Not a big deal. Anybody else have thoughts on that?
I guess I don't know. I just don't know as I sit here. Like, if you're talking about someone like putting a new set of back steps in the backyard, I don't care. I don't want to hear about that. If you're talking about someone like putting a garage in or something that's requires a permit, maybe the neighbor wants to know about that. I guess I just don't know where that line is. I guess I've never thought about the worldview of what Jesse's empowered to permit without planning board. I don't know if there's a list somewhere for that. I don't know.
yeah. But the typical idea has always been when it's big enough to go to the planning board, then the neighbors shall be notified. If it's not big enough to go to the planning board, that's where the line is usually drawn.
Yeah.
I'm not arguing one way or another. I'm just saying it's out of step.
I didn't think about just like something simple like steps or something. I guess you have a point there.
Well, here's recently, we always had home occupation come before the planning board. In the last year, we've shifted that over to the CEO can make those determinations. Did we not do that?
Yes.
So I think if someone's going to have a home occupation, I do think the neighbors should know that. And I don't know how to draw that line. If there's going to be some volume of increase in traffic of UPS trucks or customers or whatever it might be, delivery trucks, I think the neighbors might want to be concerned, or at least have the ability to come in and say what's happening here and express it about it. So I think there could be some applications which Jesse would handle that the neighbors might have an interest in hearing about. If you're going to put a chicken coop, who gives a damn? As long as there's no roosters, of course. But there are some, I don't know all Jesse's authority, which all the examples I can come up with, but I think there's probably a few in there that neighbors might want to weigh in on.
Has it been a problem in the past, Jesse?
I probably get 5 or so responses a year, I'd say, of the abutter comes in to ask a question about the notice that they got.
Then
So
why
it's
don't we leave it the way
Fairly
it is?
minimal.
Yeah, why don't we leave it just the way it is then?
Brett, were you going to say something?
I just don't have enough information really to make a decision, I guess. I don't know.
I think
I agree.
I think half of the people.
I agree with all the points. I agree with Jeff. I mean, I just don't know. I don't know what that list looks like, so I don't know.
Right.
And there's also, like, I feel like it can also be a vehicle for a neighbor to get into a pissing contest with someone over something that's completely immaterial too.
Mhm.
I don't know.
Half the people don't care, and then half the people want the notices for everything. So
I think I don't think we have, at least for me, I would leave it because I just don't have enough. I don't have enough to do anything else. We could tackle it some other time.
Let's leave it and move on. Is
I think we
everybody
should
okay
table
with
this
that?
one and have Jesse mention a few things that's come up and give us some of his history, and then we can look back at it again.
Okay. Next, we got page 65. that correct?
Yes.
A lot of strikeouts. What's going on here, Jesse? Fees.
We're just taking the fees out. Not always a good idea to have fees in the ordinance because then you can't change them without adopting a new, amending the ordinance.
Just post it on the website or something, is that the plan, or make them otherwise available?
Yeah, they're available on the website and on a sheet here at the office.
Funny, I thought we did this already. I thought we did it when John Larson was here, but that's okay.
Yep. So just fees determined by the select board. I don't know, from time to time, do we even need that? Small point.
Yes.
Suggest that you can change it, yeah, without having to, you know.
Yeah, from time to time is good because that allows you to keep going, change it this year, then next year, then the year after, whatever the hell you want to. Next week, 3 minutes from now. You don't want to limit yourself.
I'm not going to argue, but my point, I guess, was determined by the fee schedule set by the Board of Selectmen. I just didn't know why we actually needed the time because to me, it implies the same thing. They can do it whenever they want.
Up, Mr. Chairman, I think that's a lawyer legalese.
Okay, we'll leave it at legalese. Okay, next page, 66, right? Got some numbering changes here, but I did have some questions. All advertising and hearing costs should be paid by the applicant. That's not new, Jesse?
Nope.
Okay, okay. But here's what my point on the next one. Planning board reserves the right to obtain an independent evaluation of a proposed development to assist them in making necessary findings of fact. If the planning board deems such study necessary, it will request a reasonable additional sum from the applicant to defray the cost of such study or studies. Any funds not utilized, we know that. But here's my question is, we know we had a recent application where the technical fee was paid and the engineer we hired was unable to come and actually explain his findings because the applicant would not kick in for the extra additional money to pay for that. So what authority, if any, do we have to require them to do that? Can we just say, okay, if you're not going to pay it, forget it?
Yes. I'm sorry to interrupt, Jesse.
No,
I looked at this in regard to the quarry in Mount Desert. And Mr. Bear, and on behalf of McQuinn, was grousing about what it was going to cost because we wanted an independent sound expert. And he threatened to sue if we got somebody too expensive. But while I was doing that, I looked into that, and it does say reasonable. So I guess the question is, if the board wants an unreasonable expert, then the applicant can sue and the applicant can go to court. I could say a few other
Well,
choices.
my reasonable and your reasonable could be two different things.
That's what the court decides. And in regard to this, the idea is to give you as the board authority to tell the applicant that you need to have expertise. It's extremely rare. Think about the quarry. You have a quarry, which is in a residential neighborhood, and the issue becomes sound. Well, sound is really complex. And so nobody understands it. So we really needed a sound expert just to interpret what the other experts said. It was so confusing what everybody was saying. So it's pretty rare that you're going to use this. But when you need to, the idea is that you're not going to bully the applicant by threatening them with an expensive technical review, but to reasonably use it when you need an expert, such as the one you did, which I thought was excellent, by having someone come in and look at the water impacts. That's an excellent example. And I think your discretion, based on the case law, is pretty wide.
Okay, are you saying that we could have, when they refused to give us additional
Yeah.
money to pay for the expert, we could have said, okay, we're not going to consider this application any longer.
Yes. Yeah, definitely. You could have just said, well, you're denied. Thank you very much.
Interesting.
And then what they would have said was they would have appealed. And then if they lost at the Board of Appeals, they could have gone to court and said to the judge, you know, the planning board asked for something that was unreasonable.
Yeah, Mark, the word reasonable actually does work once you take it to the next level. It actually does work because all professionals have hourly rates and there's just like our applicant that came up with statistics from a book on what traffic is. You can come up with statistics on what an engineer and how many hours it would take them to look at water runoff or whatever you want to look at. So it actually does work.
And the other part of,
I actually made the motion on that one. I was shocked. I lost because I said we'd spend up to, I didn't even say I want $500, just give us an allowance up to a certain amount. I was amazed they walked away from that. I was like, I can't believe it. But made the mistake.
the other part of that reasonableness is not only the money, but it's tying what you want the money for directly to a question that's been brought up, like water runoff. So I think it's going to be pretty obvious to the board when you look at it and you throw up your hands and go, we don't understand this. That's the other part of reasonableness. You don't want to do it for every application, but things like sound attenuation, water runoff with a campground, those are tricky.
That's why we hired him.
I thought it was a good decision.
Thanks, James. We do our best. Moving right along. I understand reasonableness. I just wanted to know what action we could have taken. What's the next one, guys?
Most of them are just formatting and
Okay. Definitions. Is there something in the definitions here?
on page
Oh.
73, I'll just point out that we do have functionally water dependent uses defined. It was just under F for functionally instead of W.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay. Great. Good. And I see ground cover. Was it? No, down below ground cover. Is that? Oh, just format change.
Just
Okay.
format changes.
Okay.
Mark,
I think that's-
Mark, before we leave the definition section, can I just ask that the board might want to look at 2 words that are already defined, make sure we're happy with them? And you're going to hate me for saying this, campgrounds and campsites. I'd like-
Okay. Yeah. No. That's great. Yeah. That's
We've
what we're
just
here
put
for.
time to make sure our definition works with what we're changing. That's all I'm asking, that everyone's happy with it.
Campgrounds and campsites. Okay. Campground.
70 and 71.
I think James said something earlier about the phrase including but not limited to, and I more or less followed that conversation, but just want to like make sure that the campground definition, would it be better if we said such as tents, recreational vehicles, and shelters?
James, your opinion?
Did you say that again, Lawson?
I'm looking at the definition for campground and wondering if changing it from including but not limited to tents, recreational, and vehicles, if we change that to such as tents, recreational, and vehicles, is that a improvement
Campground,
that matters?
tractor to accommodate 2 more persons. Well, first of all, the punctuation's wrong. But
And I don't know why including is
Yeah.
capitalized, but
it should be
Anyway.
a semicolon after quarters, and then including comma, but not limited to comma. It's fine if you fix the punctuation. I just don't
Campsite.
like it because I took a seminar recently on contract drafting and poor contract drafting. And most lay people hate the term including but not limited to. That's why I try to keep it out of ordinances, because most lay people don't like it. Now, that's up to you guys, but if you're gonna do it, you should at least fix the grammar.
That any should be, the A and any should be capitalized then too. It's interesting, campsites refers to a camping unit. And why is that different, or why is it worded differently than campground, which says tents, recreational vehicles, or other shelters? To me, that's a camping unit, right?
I had no idea what a camping unit is.
Yeah, so maybe we should
Just make the
Just-
two match.
make the match, yeah.
Okay.
Well, and maybe actually a campground. What if we actually removed like the whole second part of the definition of a campground? So that a campground is any area or tract of land to accommodate 2 or more campsites. And then a campsite is actually where the temporary living quarters, tents, recreational vehicles, and other shelters is defined. But a campground is actually just many campsites. You can't have a campground without a campsite. Or maybe, I mean, yeah, right. That's it.
What do you think, folks?
I think that Lawson is a smart guy, but he's too smart by half, as they say in Nova Scotia. The rule of ordinance drafting is never change it unless you have to. So here, I think what you need to change is the grammar in the campground one. And in campsites, you just need to fix camping unit. Change camping unit to something. I don't know what.
That's the simplest change.
That's the simplest change, and that'll keep you to, generally, when you're changing ordinances, do the simplest thing you can, and you're less likely to step on something.
Does a campground have to extend all the way to the property lines? Like, or can you have a campground on part of your property and not on all of your property?
I can't see why not.
Yeah, you can't have multiple uses.
That's, I mean, basically, that's what Pointy Head was doing.
Right. They were sort of only addressing, I don't remember what percentage it
Part
was,
of
but
part of it. Yeah.
Great. So then any tract area or tract of land that's not linked to property lines in any way.
I think I saw something in the definitions of anybody else have anything? I'm gonna find it. Oh, it was just a question about residential dwelling unit. And this could refer to campgrounds or yurts or whatever. It's the containing cooking, sleeping, and toilet facilities. So what is cooking facility? Can I just have a microwave and a coffee maker, and is that a cooking facility? I mean, some people just microwave and drink coffee, or does it mean like you actually have a stove in there?
There's case law on this, and there's court cases involved on this island, specifically in Mount Desert, with a creative couple, that's a good word for them, who had gas burners, I think it was propane, and they would put in a granite countertop and then take off the granite countertop, put in granite with an opening, a different one with an opening, and burners. And then they would change it out when the code enforcement officer came each year to inspect. Until she caught them red-handed one day. So there's a lot of case law in Maine on this particular. And I disagree that yurts are not dwelling spaces. They could be. I don't think the microwave qualifies. I'm less sure about hot plates. I don't think anybody uses them anymore, but if you have burners with gas, that's definitely a cooking thing.
Mhm.
Well, burners with electricity,
Yeah,
which could be a hot plate.
yeah, I guess then you're doomed. The
Do you
thing
think
is,
that-
you want to have the three
Good.
things, right?
My question is, do you think that should be better defined?
Pardon me?
Do you think that it should be better defined?
No, because I think you're going into the abyss of hell if you do.
Okay,
A lot of case law on it, and I think what you should do is leave it like that, because it's a term that is used in almost 470 towns in Maine. That's the similar thing that's used with everybody else. And there's case law that defines it.
Can we take out the words containing cooking? Containing cooking?
No, absolutely not. What are you, crazy?
Yeah.
No. Because if you did that, no, that would be I think you could, but it'd be a hell of a lot of fun, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
you could have an outdoor kitchen.
Yeah, you could have half of your stuff in Tremont be changed overnight. That would be wacko, Jeff. Just wacko.
Okay. Page 80, definition of tree. I see a mistake here. James, you added 1.5 feet above the ground, but in parentheses, it still says 4.5 inches. Is it inches or feet? Feet, I mean, above the ground,
It should be 4.5 feet.
instead of 1.5 feet. Okay.
Yeah.
Yep, gotcha.
I was just correcting the grammar.
Seems like a weird height. Where does that come from?
The DEP.
Oh, all right. Well, they know something.
Okay, and also I saw an issue over on the next page, 83, under vegetation. To go down, measured for FOR, it should be FOUR. I know you like clean copy there, James.
Where is it?
See it?
Yeah. I thought it was an American spelling. No, never mind.
I got it.
Got that, Jesse?
On 83, you said?
Yeah, under vegetation. Measured for, it's FOR in our copy, it should be FOUR, as in 4, the numeral, and 1/2 feet.
Got it. Yep.
Okay. So all I see here, anybody else see anything?
I have a couple of points from my memo.
Yep.
One of the ones was in item 2, cluster developments. I wondered if cluster developments should be subject to site plan review. Or are they now?
And
Article 6C,
let's see. We're in the land use ordinance.
yep.
What page?
Oh, geez, I don't know. Just a minute, give me a minute.
It's 37.
37?
God bless you.
Thank you. Oh, it's not marked in here. Okay.
So cluster developments, I've never seen one that wasn't a big commercial development. I suppose it's, in theory, it's possible. You could have a bunch of houses that's like, I guess out in Sandy Lane in Bar Harbor, they did a bunch of workforce housing in one area and then had a lot of trees around it. But I think all of those should go for site plan review.
Yeah, it looks that way. What do others think?
I agree.
It's a big enough project.
They tend to be big projects, not small projects. You don't see a lot of them across your desk. You don't get a lot of them. And generally they're big. So Jesse, if you could find an appropriate place to add that, I think it would be under items that site plan review, the following
Right.
items, just add all cluster developments
Okay.
and a reference to the section.
In site plan review, you're recommending, James.
No, in the land use ordinance.
Okay, okay,
In the land use ordinance where it says the following items shall go to site plan review ordinance.
okay,
It
Yep.
lists the items that go, that should be one of them.
okay, gotcha.
And the only other thing I have in regard to the land use ordinance goes to the site plan review ordinance, which is philosophically, this issue of duplicative standards, that's just crazy. And so, your land use ordinance is your fundamental ordinance. And I don't know if you want to tackle this at another meeting when you do the site plan review ordinance. But the standards in the land use ordinance, for example, for parking, should be the standards.
I agree. That's something I was going to bring up. They should be the same.
Yeah, no. They shouldn't be in both places. So the discussion we had earlier, which I really liked about buffering for campgrounds, someone said, well, let's just refer to the buffering standards. I like that. Same thing with the site plan review ordinance. In the site plan review ordinance, if you have a parking issue, I think what it should say is parking, you should meet the standards in the land use ordinance. In addition, there are the following special things in site plan review. See what I mean?
I see what you mean, but they are different. And that means I think we should review the LUO parking standards and compare them with it and make recommendations.
Yeah, but you look at the site plan one and once you change the site plan review ordinance to get rid of all parking standards, then you can add back in ones that are needed in exceptional circumstances where you need site plan review. See what I mean?
Yep.
And there's a number of things like that. I can't, off the top of my head, there were 3 or 4 of them. I was going through the site plan review ordinance and I kept saying to myself, what the hell, that's in the land use ordinance. That's your primary document.
Well, I see you even asked the question whether the site plan review should be back in the LUO.
Yeah, that made a lot of sense to me, but that's a bigger issue and it's political. I guess you already had this argument before.
No, I don't think it's political. I think the board members at the time were led by our code enforcement officer at the time to make the change, to agree to the change. And yes, that was probably a mistake. At this stage of the game, I don't know whether we can easily put it back in. It might be better just to do what we're doing, right?
I have a program set out in my memo and in the changes to the site plan review ordinance to try to integrate the two. That's up to you guys. I think it's as long as philosophically you understand what you're doing. And that is to reviewing something under the land use ordinance 99% of the time or 80% of the time. And then occasionally you're reviewing something under the site plan review ordinance. But when you do, the primary document is still the land use ordinance. Because when you are in the site plan review ordinance and site plan review, you're going through the standards and you're also looking at all of the standards of the land use ordinance. As long as you understand that's what you're doing, then you won't confuse the applicant. I think the applicant always expects that you're going to have to meet the standards of the land use ordinance. Indeed, I was shocked just to not see an integration clause. And when I was reading all this material, Ed Bear raised the point about, in that application, about it didn't have reference to the land use ordinance, and I was shocked. So you're not going to have that problem anymore because we're going to integrate the two. So efficiency wise, it would be better to have it in the land use ordinance, but efficiency wise as to how you're going to move forward and get stuff changed. You've got a lot of changes right now. Maybe that's a thing for another day.
Opinions, Jesse, anybody else?
No,
It's it-
I would say that I think it would be much easier down the road if it was back in the land use ordinance. But like James said, I think we have enough changes now. We should tackle that later.
Anybody else?
I sort of disagree. I sort of feel like if we're going to make this many changes, we might as well, I mean, because all these changes have to go to the town meeting anyway, we might as well make a recommendation that actually like makes sense in a way, because I feel like it'd be nice to have a document that could work for the next, I don't know, 3 or 5 years. Like by the time, and be able to sort of use these ordinances until the comprehensive plan is finished and it's gone through that whole process, and we come up with whatever the new big dramatic or not changes we want to our zoning and our land use ordinance. But that's so far away that I think that it'd be nice to try to do it all right now. And if we have time, and maybe we're biting off more than we can chew and we need to have some deadline. And I guess I still don't fully know how
Right.
much else we need to do. I mean,
Right.
it's kind of nice tonight that we don't have an application to review, so we can just focus on ordinances, but
Right. One issue, of course, is we have to have public hearings, and they have to be held a certain time. Actually, I think before town meeting, right, Jesse?
So we have scheduled the planning board's public hearing for February 23rd.
I don't think we're going to make that.
That one doesn't have any
for
deadline.
February,
Yeah. Because the ordinance doesn't need to be done. You just have to have a discussion with the public in the process.
okay.
And then the select board's public hearings are tied to the town meeting date. This board, the decision has to be made whether it's going to be an open town meeting question or a referendum question. If it's a referendum question, your timelines, your deadlines become much sooner. If it's an open town meeting question, deadlines are pretty far in the future.
I don't know enough. I mean, is there a pro or con to either of those things?
I
Do you have a
think
recommendation for what we should do?
I think traditionally, we've always gone to open town meeting. We didn't this year because of COVID, of course, and that everything, the entire meeting was held by referendum vote. And the
Right,
thing about going to the floor of the town meeting, it gives the residents a chance to again ask questions, and for us, the planning board members, to hopefully answer those questions.
Right. Yes.
James, you're shaking your head. Yes, you must agree.
I'm shaking my head because I think you're too ambitious. I think that if I was on your board, I would be looking at least at November. Because you've got a lot of changes here. And you have enough for a big argument just in campgrounds, let alone some of the other changes you want to do. So, I don't know, you know the town better than I do. But in some of the other towns I'm in, and I live in Bar Harbor, if we were doing that, this many changes, in mid-February, we would be thinking November. I know things are done differently in Tremont and faster, more efficient. But the times that we tried to rush stuff through didn't work. Unless you have a sense of burning urgency for something in particular.
Board, what do you think? I'd like to see something on, go to town meeting, at least some of these changes.
I think we should-
We're only doing two things. Are we addressing campgrounds and harmonizing the land use and site plan review? Isn't that really what we're doing? Right. So I think it's how you package it. Yeah, I think you package it that way and have a good, crisp, explanation of what the changes are. And I'm ambivalent about trying to put the documents together. it's a long
Yeah, I wouldn't want to put the two together at this point.
I would just stick with it. I would vote to stick with the tighten up the campgrounds. We can just say, look, we had two goals: tighten up the campgrounds and harmonize the land use and site plan. That's all. That's what we did. Every single one of these revisions is in that through those two aims. Here's how they line up. We're done.
How about the,
A year and a half after we're done the comprehensive plan, or whatever.
how about some of the just housekeeping changes as far as some of the editing, grammatical changes and things like that?
You say that, but 3 buckets, 2 substantive and 1 housekeeping.
I'm sorry, I didn't understand what.
So that's fine too. You 3 buckets, 2 substantive.
Okay,
buckets,
okay.
just trying to, nits and gnats, things like that. I would try to do it. Now. I mean, that's my.
Would it make sense to have the integration of the land use and the site plan review essentially be part of the housekeeping bucket? Isn't that basically just more housekeeping? Or do you think that it makes sense to have those separate?
No, I think you're right. I mean, I think.
Like the housekeeping stuff's not controversial. There's nothing.
Yeah,
To,
you're right. I think, I hesitate because I don't know enough about the basis of that appeal. Like, I don't know whether they would say that's not housekeeping. You've got, that's a real problem when you don't know how to use these things together. But
I don't know why it has to be in the housekeeping bucket. 3 buckets is fine or fine.
This is Kevin. I haven't been paying attention to most of the meeting, but I've been in and out. If I can chime in for a second here. We almost always have some kind of housekeeping, grammatical corrections, reorganizing the lettering. That's pretty standard. That goes through without basically any questions at all. I think if you stated the problem that Ed Bear brought up about the 2 ordinances not being tied together, and then whatever solution you guys thought would be best, either tying them together with some kind of a statement in one or the other or both, or made it or rolled it back into the part of the original land use ordinance where it was up until, relatively recently, and just explained that was an issue that popped up. I don't think you're going to get any kickback on any feedback on that either. The campground changes are the only thing I think you might hear something about. So my advice would be try to correct the problem with the 2 ordinances not being tied together now, and have that go to town meeting, and however you want to deal with the rest of it. And again,
I think we kind of have an idea where we're going with this. The 3 ideas, some basic housekeeping changes, which are nothing. Could be any issues there. The campground might be a big issue with some people, and the integration clause definitely has to be there. Okay.
So if we could have Jesse do, unless you guys want to appoint one of your member, do a 3 warrant articles. And then you're going to have to go through the ordinance and identify the changes. I could do it, but I'm really expensive. I'm so told. Go through and say, number one, the integration clauses. Go through all the integration clauses, and they'll go under one warrant article. All the things that Kevin's talking about, the housekeeping stuff, warrant article number 2, warrant article number 3, campground. That way, if you get one or the other defeated, I think that's an excellent idea. It's a great way to look at it. I was only really worried about the campground stuff. So you might get the other 2 passed.
Hopefully we'll get all 3 passed. Anyway, it's getting late. And I imagine some of us would like to eat. I know I do. And that's why I ask, we still have a little bit to go through here, but I think we can do this a little bit later, the integration clause and that sort of thing. And maybe in retrospect, we should have started on that. But do you think we can, well, when's our next meeting? The 28th?
23rd.
23rd.
23rd. And that's when the public hearing is?
Yeah.
So we need to do it before the public hearing to get it together.
You don't need to. The public hearing is just to allow the public to have input that the process is going on, and does the public have any input at this time? It doesn't need to be complete. It doesn't need to be a final draft. At this
Right.
stage.
And we won't have the campground application at that meeting. That'll be in March, correct?
No, it'll be the 23rd for completeness.
Okay. So we have 2 options. We can either schedule another meeting next week to get through this stuff,
Mhm.
or we can wait until the meeting on the 23rd. I'll leave it up to you folks.
We have the campground coming in on 23rd.
Yeah, completeness.
Completeness of the application.
That's going to take some time, isn't it?
How about next week then? We can't do it together on the 23rd. I move we do it in 2 different sessions.
Can't do,
Well, I just wanted to poll everybody else. Is everybody fine if we did it like next Tuesday night? Shouldn't take too long.
there's a select board meeting Tuesday.
Oh, why? Oh, Monday is a holiday.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Do we have to do it on a Tuesday?
No,
Why not on a Wednesday?
we could, but I just want to make sure people are available and willing to,
I can't do next Wednesday.
okay. But you could do
Thursday.
Thursday.
What do I, no, I can't do Thursday. Thursday, we got a comprehensive plan task force meeting.
Oh, that's right, yeah.
Um,
But we don't need you. We need a
Right.
quorum. Sorry.
Yeah.
I mean, we like your.
No,
input
that's
and all, but, Brett, would you be
feel
able to
better.
make Wednesday?
Mark, can we do it on a Monday?
It's a holiday. Jesse doesn't work.
Of course Jesse can work.
He could, but he's not.
Holidays.
Talking next Wednesday, the 17th.
Next
Yeah.
Wednesday, what?
17th, is that the question?
Yep.
Yeah, we can, but
You can
Yeah.
do it? Okay, Jeff,
When?
next Wednesday?
I can do next Wednesday.
Marjorie,
Yes.
okay. It's 6, or do you want to do it at a different time?
Lawson, is there a time you can chime in on it?
Well, we got to ask James because he wants to be here too.
I think James is most.
He's going to pay for those cigars.
Yeah, I like 5. I could be there Wednesday, but I like 5.
I can do 5.
I'll
I
be
can do
looking
5.
up.
Jeff?
I have a Zoom meeting at 4 to 5:30. I could probably bow out early. Do you need me for quorum?
Well, we only need 3 for a quorum these days.
All right. I'll make it. I'll cut the other one short.
We won't say anything important until you show up.
Okay,
Get it all
Okay.
over with before I get there, will you?
and Jesse, would it be possible to have you do a draft with the changes we've done tonight? Or is that too much to ask?
No, I can probably do it on. Yeah, I can do it Thursday. This Thursday.
I mean, maybe that's not helpful. Maybe I'm asking too much. I mean, would that help anybody else, or we could just review and make sure that quickly that it's okay? James says yes.
Yeah, I think it's really helpful to have just the changes tonight that there was discussion about. People
Yep.
said Jesse will write something, or those ones especially.
I agree. Mistakes are made if we don't do it that way.
Okay, sounds good. So unless somebody wants to continue on with this, let's just continue next Wednesday.
I think
With
you're
that.
going to send a reminder or an agenda or something.
Yep.
How do you
Jesse
do?
always does.
You put your notices up at the town hall, or
Yeah,
All
the post office.
and then you typically send an email to all the board members?
Yep.
Okay, good. I'm ready to go home.
Okay.
Oh.
I just want to mention I think we covered this. The selectmen at their last meeting did approve our bylaw changes, so that's in effect now. And I
Yeah.
think Jesse, at some point will get us a clean copy of the
Yeah,
new.
I printed copies today, so you can pick them up.
All right.
Jesse, will
That-
we have packages to pick up on Tuesday?
Yep.
Great.
Okay, good. Unless anybody has anything else to say, I'll take a motion to set the date for the next meeting, which is Wednesday. What's the date? The 17th, folks?
17th.
Okay,
17th at 5
17
p.m.
at 5 o'clock by Zoom.
Yeah.
Somebody want to make that motion?
I move. Go ahead, Jeff.
I so move.
Have a second?
Second.
Motion is second to schedule our next meeting for Wednesday, the 17th at 5 p.m. via Zoom. All in favor, Jeff?
Aye.
Marjorie?
Aye.
Lawson?
Aye.
Brett? Myself, yes. Okay, so 5-0 on that. And I'll take a motion to adjourn.
I move that we adjourn.
Second.
Motion is second to adjourn. All in favor, Jeff?
Aye.
Marjorie?
Aye.
Lawson?
Aye.
Brett? Yep, myself, yes. Okay, well, thanks, folks. I know it was a little difficult at times, but we got through it. And we'll see you next week.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks for
Thank you.
steering the ship, Mark.